Ramen, in simple terms, is a Japanese noodle dish in some kind of delicious broth. And there are literally hundreds of versions of this dish, and some of them take days to make. But today I'm making probably the easiest bowl of ramen to convincingly pull off at home, and it won't take much longer than this to pull off. Let's get stuck into a delicious bowl of chili miso ramen. Look, I don't hate it, but we could definitely do better. So yes, there are hundreds of variations of ramen, but here are the 4 main types. Shiyo, shoyu, tonkotsu. Realize I practiced that a lot to make sure I got my pronunciation right. But we're talking about miso ramen today, and I just want to talk about miso quickly. We're going to use 2 types of miso. You can just use one, it doesn't really matter, just double the amount of the single one that you're using. It doesn't not really matter, but I think you can do it with just one if you don't want to buy 2. So we're going to use a light miso or a white miso and a red miso. And this red miso in particular, I'm a really big fan of because it's got bonito flakes in it, or ground up bonito. And that's one of the main ingredients in making dashi stock. And it gives it a really rich umami flavor. Anyway, let's get some other aromats ready and we'll start this broth. So we have some ginger, which I'm just going to peel. And I've probably gone a bit aggressive with my peeling there. I'm gonna grate some of this, probably almost half of that, I'd say, maybe not quite. That's heaps. Leave that to one side. Garlic, I'm gonna do 4 cloves, also finely grated. Then I've got 4 spring onions, just the white part. And we're just gonna, doesn't need to be super fine, but we're gonna cut those in half and then finely slice them. This broth has pork mince in it, so it's a little bit chunky. It's not like a strained broth. So while yes, having everything the same size is important from a cooking perspective, you don't need it to be super fine because there are gonna be kind of, bits in your broth anyway. Bits in your broth, that's not a very elegant way of describing it. Okay, so we've got a pan over a medium heat. I'm gonna add a couple of tablespoons of neutral flavored oil. Let that get hot, and then we'll add our pork mince. Once you put it in there, just leave it for a minute to help that kind of the outside seal. We're not trying to develop heaps of color here, but we do want to seal it in a little bit. Just a little touch of salt, don't need much. After a couple of minutes, start breaking up your pork. So our pork's nicely broken up. We're starting to develop a little bit of color here. We're gonna add our garlic, ginger, and spring onions. Stir that through your pork. Be careful at this point, we don't want to burn anything, especially now that garlic and ginger's in there. If that stuff burns, it goes real bitter. And we're developing some really nice fond on the pan here, which is great. Make sure we don't get that too dark either. Once our aromats are stirred through, we've got some sake. We're going to deglaze the pan with the sake and use that to scrape all that delicious fond off the bottom. Now we get to the fun stuff. Chili bean sauce. You should be able to get this in most Asian supermarkets. If you're not near an Asian supermarket, you can replace this with chili crisp will work. You don't want anything too oily, so when you get to the bottom of the chili crisp jar and it's all dry, that stuff will work really well. But this stuff's great because it's got a fermented bean in it, so it's got a lot of umami. So I'm gonna add about 2 tablespoons of that. Dark miso, 2 tablespoons, and light miso, 2 tablespoons. Stir those sauces through. Doesn't need to be perfect, but helps us start breaking it up. And then I'm gonna season it with a little bit of white pepper, and we're gonna add our chicken stock. Now you can make your own chicken stock, link above for my recipe for chicken stock, or you can just buy a good quality one. And that's pretty much the broth done. We're gonna bring that to a simmer. We're gonna check the seasoning. We're gonna cook it for about 20 minutes just to make sure all those flavors are well combined. You can honestly eat this in 5 minutes once it's up to a simmer. If you've got a bit of time, I do encourage you just to kind of let it hang out for a couple of minutes. 20 minutes is ideal. Next up, we're gonna talk through garnishes. Then we'll run through noodles and we're ready to serve. So let's talk through the garnishes. And the first thing I want to talk about is one that's actually optional because we already have pork in our broth. And that's char siu pork. Different to the Chinese style kind of roast pork that has a similar name, or the same name to be perfectly honest. It's also worth mentioning that this is gonna take much longer than the half an hour I kind of started this video talking about how it's really fast. This is an optional extra and it's probably best to be made the day before. To make the char siu pork, take a piece of pork belly, 30 centimeters by 20 centimeters roughly. Then you're gonna roll it up into a log and you're gonna use butcher's twine to keep it nice and tight during the cooking process. Place that into an oven-safe dish that you have the lid for and preheat your oven to 160 degrees Celsius. To the pot with the pork, you're gonna add sliced ginger, garlic, and spring onion whites. Then you're also gonna add half a cup of soy sauce, half a cup of mirin, and half a cup of sake. Place the lid on your pot into the oven for an hour and a half to cook. Once it's finished cooking, remove it from the oven and let it cool a little bit before you place it in the fridge to let it cool completely. And then we end up with this beautiful thing. We also end up with a bunch of the liquor. Now the liquor is perfect for making soy sauce eggs. So the soy sauce eggs are simply soft boiled eggs that I've cooked for 6.5 minutes, cooled quickly in an ice bath, and then peeled. And then all I've done is poured over them the cold cooking liquid from the char siu pork. If you're not making char siu pork, I still suggest you do the 6.5 minute eggs. And you can either leave them just as normal soft boiled eggs, or you can make that same liquid from earlier and let it cool down to make soy sauce eggs. And that same amount of liquid will easily do 6 to 10 eggs, not a problem at all. We'll come back to those in a second, but let's just get our pork ready. Just gonna take this butcher string off. Stunning. And then we're gonna take some slices. You want them about 1/2 centimeter thick. Now there's a couple of ways we can finish this. Some people you see in the restaurants will just use a blowtorch to get some color on it. I prefer just to use a nice pan, a little bit of oil, and just get some color on the outside, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So what else are we gonna need? Some spring onion greens, just finely sliced. Got some nori sheets here. You only really need about 1/4 of a sheet for each bowl. So just cut the nori sheet into 4. And another classic garnish is just some corn, straight off the cob. Just run your blade down the side. And we don't need to cook this corn either, because it's just gonna go into the hot broth anyway. So just leave it raw. Made a big old mess, haven't I? Lucky I got this handy dandy Andy Cook's Kitchen Essential scraper. Garnish is sorted. The only other thing we need is our noodles. Ramen noodles, arguably, I don't know, it's tricky to say, but probably one of the most important things about making ramen. So you've got 3 options when it comes to noodles. You can make your own. Might be a step too far for a 30-minute dinner. You can go to your local Asian supermarket and hopefully they stock something like this, a fresh Japanese ramen noodle. This is your best option if you're not making your own, in my opinion. If you can't get those, then you can buy a dried version. Definitely think these ones are better, but this is a viable option if you can't get these. Anyway, we're gonna pull this bowl of ramen together now, and it's all gonna happen pretty quickly. I've got a pan over there that's hot, almost a little bit too hot, and we're gonna add the char siu to the dry pan. We're looking for some color here. Get that in, and ideally put a weight on it, just to get some nice contact. Our broth's nice and hot. Noodles, I like a lot of noodles. So I'm gonna use 2 bunches of these. In the water they go. This is just water. Season with a little bit of salt, nothing crazy. We only need to cook those noodles for 2 minutes. You also wanna make sure you preheat your bowl. You can do that by holding it over your pot. I also like to add a spoonful of the noodle water to the bowl. It's boiling. That just starts to preheat the bowl. Let's flip our char siu now. Place our water back in the pot, that's done its job. Let that water drain off. You don't want any of this noodle water in your bowl. Your noodles are just gonna absorb it all. You want it to absorb the broth. Yum. Adjust our noodles, want a nice high pile in the center. In goes our pork. Like I said, that pork really is optional. Next comes our broth. Make sure you mix it because all that pork mince will be at the bottom. Corn. The heat of that broth will just cook that corn through. Corn, even corn like this raw, is delicious. Spring onion, our soy sauce egg in half. And the last thing that you put on is the nori, because the nori will start to get soggy and you want it to stay nice and crisp. And there you go, chili miso ramen. Super achievable for the home cook to make a delicious bowl of ramen like this, and it doesn't have to take 24 hours of boiling pork bones. All right, let's have a taste. One of the things that I think scares a lot of home cooks is balancing flavors in dishes like this. And it's one of those things that just takes practice. Taste it when it's in the pot. If you're not happy with it, adjust it. And remember, you can always add more, you can't take it out. Oh, it's so rich. That's delicious. It's rich, it's a really deep umami flavor, lovely pork flavor, a little bit of sweetness from the miso, and a lovely saltiness from the chili bean paste. It's spicy, but it's not blow your head off spicy. Yum. That is comfort food at its finest, and it's also one of those dishes that you could eat all year round. Absolutely delicious. Well, thank you legends so much for watching. Please like this video if you're doing anything from it. And if you're not subscribed, then click that subscribe button and the little bell icon, and then you're gonna know every time we post a video. We post videos here every single week about recipe, food, and food stories. We'll see you next week. Peace.